to the newest episode of Over It. This is Dr. Donna Gilman, and I am so honored to have as our guest on our little pod today, Kristen Gordon. And Kristen is the principal of our charming grammar school in Little Conway, Massachusetts. Kristen, welcome to Over It.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to see you. You always have a special place in my heart, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm very honored that you asked me to do this. So thank you so much.
Oh, I'm thrilled to have you on. You honestly have been on my mind. I mean, just a little background for our listeners. My son graduated from your school 2 years ago now, and I always think and tell people that you were such a main reason, I think, why my son made it through elementary school. You played such a huge role in getting him through elementary school and getting me through his elementary school experience. You are just tremendous at what you do. I mean, quintessential. You couldn't dream of a better person for the position of grammar school principal. I mean, you just infused that school with so much love and light and joy. And it's hard to even put into words how lucky I feel we were to, have you as a huge part of his elementary school experience.
Thank you. I feel like I'm the one with the joy and the honor to have people like you and your son and other families and children and a part of my life. So I feel the exact way that you do. I'm very, very lucky. It really is the best job in the world.
Oh gosh. I mean, right before we came on, we were talking about telling our stories, and you shared just a little anecdote about a little girl
Yeah,
you interacted with. Would you be willing to share that?
sure, sure. So, I've learned over the years through my own experiences, which are, sort of what drives a lot of what we do, that telling your story is very, very healing. So I've been working with a little student who having a lot of anxiety over some very specific things. And I told her to tell me her story and, tell me what's going on. And she trusted me enough to do that, which I always feel very honored when children do that. And I told her that every time she tells her story, she's going to heal a little bit more and she's going to feel a little bit better. And I asked her after she told me her story about her anxieties if she felt better. And she said she did feel better at that moment. And so since then, she has told the counselor her story, teacher her story, and we just hope that she continues to tell her story. And that's going to be a goal of ours, because every time she tells her story, she looks a little lighter. Even if it's for the next hour or the next 2 hours, she looks a little lighter. So I really believe in people and children telling their stories as part of the healing process or getting over anxiety or whatever is going on.
As usual, Kristen, you're about to bring me to tears. You always have this effect on me. And I just think that's so beautiful. And it's also so true for us as adults. I think that the more we can tell our stories, the more that we heal a little piece at a time. And I am inviting you into an opportunity to tell your story or some aspect of your story today. And of course, I have a million questions for you because I really know you as obvious principal, but I don't know a lot about your personal journey, of course. And I don't really even, yeah. So, I mean, where would you begin someone if I said to you, Kristen, you have a chance to tell your story? Where do you want
Yeah.
to?
Well, some people might be surprised to know that my story is a story filled with loss and grief and abandonment and PTSD. And early on in life, I really believe that a first grade teacher, changed my life. I later went on to write my thesis about children in grief and how this one particular teacher changed my life. And I believe that that's a big part of why I got into education and I wanted to be a teacher, because I feel like she she was a person who really did change my life. And I tell my staff all the time that we're impacting students' life every day, every minute of every day. And there are children's lives who we can change without even realizing that we're changing their lives. So I've struggled my whole life with loss and grief and abandonment, which, later turns out to be PTSD and young adulthood now in my 50s, a lot of loss in my life. And I feel like it can relate to the students who have anxiety, some feel abandoned in any way, shape, or form. And, I feel like I can really impact those students. I grew up in a low-income household. My father died when I was very young, so I had a single mom. And so I feel like I understand the life and the playing field out there for students who are growing up low income. And my job is to always try to make a level playing field for all of the children, because the key out of poverty is education. The key out of loss and PTSD can be education. It just brings you on to a whole new life. So I hope every single day that I come into work that I instill that into our children, and our staff, we can instill that into our children.
Brilliant. I mean, you may be familiar with this term from the research on attachment, but there is this concept of earned secure, meaning no matter what has gone on in a child's early life, if there is at least one adult, that could be a teacher, it could be a principal, quite frankly, it could be the nurse at the school, but one adult in their life that they feel a sense of unconditional support and positive regard, that can have a tremendous impact on their ability to later form healthier relationships in their lives and have an ability to trust others appropriately. And so just thinking about that in your story, I wonder about, was that your mom for you? Was it somebody outside of the home that also added to your ability ultimately to become someone who could trust others appropriately?
So I agree with you. I think resilience through hard things is built on having at least one adult that just comes through for you, no matter what the circumstances are. And that is the case with me. My sister, which I'll talk about at some point, she didn't make it. She didn't have the resilience that I had. And I often look back and wonder why she didn't make it. And I can see that she didn't have necessarily the same level of support and the strength of some people in her life that I did. So I'm always looking at that. Why does one child, why are they able to deal with this better than another child? And as an adult, why was I able to make it through some hard stuff? My sister was ultimately not able to make it through some hard stuff. And I'm always sort of trying to analyze that. My goal in life is to help children. And that's been my goal in life since I was 16 years old. And I take that goal and I take that responsibility very, very seriously. The children are it for me. And I've, like I said, since 16 years old, because I believe that what happened to me and my journey, that's why I am here today. Because, when you're younger, who knows what you want to be when you grow up? And I think my experiences have really led me here today. And I think that one of my strengths, everyone has things to work on, but one of my strengths is relating to children and is having children trust me and having an impact in their lives.
Right. And parents as well. I mean, you give just as much support. I can say this, my son was on an IEP. You were at every IEP team meeting. You and I sometimes were communicating multiple times a week, particularly in the COVID years when all children were struggling, all teachers were struggling, you were struggling, but particularly children with special needs and special learning needs were struggling.
Yes.
We were in constant communication.
Yes.
when you think about, the years leading up to, and I'm curious about this, maybe this epiphany or this sense of knowing that you got by the age of 16, that this was going to be your career path. What were those sort of, if to the extent you feel comfortable sharing those life experiences leading up to 16 that got you to that epiphany?
Yeah, great, sure. So my father was diagnosed with colon cancer when he was 27 years old. So I was 3, my brother was 5, and then he went into remission. And at 28 years old, my younger brother was born. And at 29 years old, right before my brother turned 1, so I was 5 at the time, my brother was 7, and my other brother was 1, my father passed away of colon cancer. It was very, very tragic for the family. We spent a lot of time, holidays in the hospital, and my mother just being so distraught, of course, being so young and having 3 young children and losing her husband. Back then, my mother tells me that she and my father never talked about the fact that he had colon cancer. The doctor really never talked about the fact to my father that he had colon cancer, although my mother believes that somehow he knew. And so the loss of one of your primary caregivers at such a young age, part of my healing process, and a lot of times I question, what would my life have been like if I had my father? How would my life have been different? How would I have been emotionally along the way, security wise? And then my Bapchi came to live with us. And she was just a light in our lives, and one of those people that was there right away. And then when I was 10, my Bapchi passed away. Since then, my mother had remarried, and she had my sister. And shortly after that, she had my brother. So there's 5 siblings, 3 brothers and 2 sisters.
Okay.
And then, it was just loss after loss after loss. It was, my father, then my Bapchi, then my grandmother, and then my grandfather, all before the age of 14.
Right.
And so I remember very clearly, I can still remember that exact pit in my stomach. Sometimes it still comes to me if I have a lot of anxiety, of going to school and being so petrified that when I got home that my mother wasn't going to be there. And just not even being able to concentrate in school. So when we say that kids have anxiety in school and they look like they're not paying attention or they're not progressing, they can't pay any attention. The anxiety is just taking their breath away. And so how can you pay attention when you're worried if your mother's gonna be home when you get home? You've already lost your.
Right.
And so feelings of abandonment, feelings of loss, being afraid a lot, just became who I was. My grief is very complicated to this day. If I lose someone, it's not just the grief of that person, it's all those other grief moments that come
That's been
through.
stored in the heart, right? And the
Yeah.
emotional overlays of all of those losses,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Again with a new
Yeah.
loss.
Yeah. And then for moving forward, so there was a lot of trauma in my early childhood years, not a lot of security at all, being afraid most of the time. And I had this teacher in first grade, which was probably the hardest year, who allowed me to call my mother in the middle of the day for the end of the day just to make sure she was there. So she got it. She got it. She got me. She would do my hair in the morning sometimes if my mother wasn't, she was depressed, if she wasn't into doing hair. She just made me feel very, very special. And she was, I still tell her she was one of the people that saved my life, really. Because having stayed in that desperation for too long, I don't know which direction my life would have gone into. And whatever I needed, she just got it. And I think it's just who she was. And I want to be that person to children too. Night fears, being afraid to sleep, just being afraid of loss and being abandoned. And so I learned, sort of found my way, although it was difficult. My sister, on the other hand, who was 8 years younger than me, she had a different father, but she was there through the loss of my grandfather, my grandmother, people who were important in her life. When she was 30 years old, she had a cosmetic surgery, and I was 40, she was 32. And she developed some really, really tough staph infections after the surgery. And so she started taking pain pills and antibiotics, obviously for the infections. But we're going on 3 months, and my sister's taking 32 pain pills a day, all prescribed. We're going on 6 months, and she's taking 28 pain pills a day. So we really started to get worried, and we really tried to do all sorts of things. We tried to section her. My sister didn't realize she had a problem. She said, I control the pills, they don't control me. We couldn't section her because she was going to work every day. She was going to work. She was doing great at work. She didn't show any signs, there were no police calls or anything like that. My mother went to the very doctor's office who was prescribing her the pain pills to try to plead with her to, let's change direction. And when my mother said she wanted to see Dr. Such and Such, she was told that she wouldn't be able to see the doctor, that the doctor was very busy. And my mother said, well, I'll wait until she's not. And they called the police on my mother because she really wanted to, try to fix this. We tried taking pills away, delivering every so many hours her medication. And then my mother wrote a letter to the president of the specific hospital. And very shortly after that, my sister was cut off from her medication. And she turned around and she bought a fentanyl patch. And now she was 32. This was 2 years of this. And she ingested the fentanyl patch and she passed away instantly.
Wow.
And so that was the most difficult time in my life. The most difficult time in my life. And, a lot of guilt around what more could we have done? And then they took it to trial. The DA's office took it to trial. It was the first case in Massachusetts where the DA's office was going to prosecute someone for selling her the fentanyl patch. They caught the person who sold the fentanyl patch. They had a sting and they caught the person. And that was 2 years before the trial. So as you can imagine, this pain and grief just carried on and on. They built a case, and 2.5 years later, we went to trial. And my mother and I were in that courtroom every day for 2 weeks. They ended up finding the person guilty of manslaughter, and she went to jail. And she continues to be in jail. So that too was another turning point in my life. And also these questions of how did I make it? And my sister didn't make it.
Right.
How come I had the resilience and she didn't have the resilience? And I've studied a lot about resilience and why some people make it and some people don't. And it always points to those few possibly people in your life who were there to help along the way. And I found those people. I can name those people. And I don't think my sister found those people, to be honest with you. So I think she had much less resilience, and that was a really sad loss. Donna, in terms of over it, I decided that after my sister died that I was not going to be angry. That wasn't a good emotion for me. I'm not in general an angry person. And again, my grief is so complicated. It's just complicated. And so I immediately saw a therapist who I knew for a long time. He worked with children that I knew, and I trusted him. And I walked in and I said, you know what, I need to grieve this. And, I read books and books and books. And, grief, you can't go over it. You can't go under it. You can't go around it. You have to go through it. So I said, I want to go through this with you. I want you to help me. I want you to give me specifics. I don't want to end up angry after this. And I need to come to some sort of peace. And he was very specific with me. He said, let's make a plan of when you're going to go back to work. Let's make a plan of when you're going to delete your last phone message from your sister. Let's make a plan to go over the autopsy together. And when I came out of that, at the end of that trial, my mother was very relieved that the person was convicted. I had no skin in that game, whether the person was convicted or not, because I worked through my anger. I worked through being angry at anyone, including my sister, for her death. But it was a lot of work, and will never say that I'm over my sister's death, but I was very proud of myself to make that decision that I'm going to get through this without anger.
Wow.
And so I felt like I got over that anger, which was a more peaceful place for me than in an angry place.
I
And
mean,
again, it's why I do what I do,
that's right. I mean, it all sort of circles back to this idea of both resilience and the connection between resilience and connection, resilience and some support, particularly in the lives of children. And of course, when children, I mean, people really do underestimate children across the board, right? They underestimate what children are capable of, what children are picking up on, what children understand, and what children carry on their little shoulders when they walk into a school setting. And of course, we know if a child is under-resourced in the home, there may be abuse, there may be neglect, there may be food scarcity. And then they're walking into a school environment, and that child is now vulnerable. They're vulnerable to bullying. They're vulnerable to, falling through the cracks in the educational system. You're someone who has like a razor sharp eye out for kids like that because you were a kid like that.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And, if a kid in this school needs a snack at 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock, they're getting a snack. If a student in this school needs, an extra walk outside, they're getting an extra walk outside. My goal is the children. Children are not going to learn with anxiety hanging over them. They're not going to learn. They're not going to connect with abandonment issues of any kind. They're not, and I get that. And I try to work with my staff on that, and they're outstanding. But also, unless you've gone through the real stuff, I try to do a lot of simulation activities, I was a special ed teacher half of my career, and simulation activities about what it might be to be, have autism, and how, the communication and all of that. But, unless you've gone through it and lived it, it's really hard to explain what life might be like and why I might have high alert on specific children, because, I've been through it. I've sort of been through it all, all of the things that little children should never go through, right? Yep. Never. I've been through it.
Yep.
And I'm able to give parents advice if there's a death or if there's a loss, even if a child loses a dog, that's a big deal,
Yeah, that's right. And we know, I mean, just humans in general, we cannot access our executive functioning for learning and memory and encoding and all of that if we're in fight or flight. If our reptilian brain, if our amygdala or emotional brain is, hijacking us because we're in high alert and we're in hypervigilance, we cannot take in information. We cannot be effective learners at any age. And so if we can't focus on safety as the priority for children and safety as the priority for adults, there is no learning. There is no higher functioning, right? Over It is proudly sponsored by the Couples Center of the Pioneer Valley, offering specialized services to couples and individuals with relationship issues and concerns. Check them out on the web at pioneervalleycouplestherapy.com or call them at 413-570-0067. I wonder, in terms of, we're kind of all over the place because there's so much you're bringing forth that I just honor, but in thinking about school safety, I mean, I know one of the things you've been really great about is an anti-bullying campaign or just a philosophy in the school. And I remember my son I remember hearing him sometimes talking to friends who went to different schools on 2 occasions, and they were talking about in their school that there were bullies. And I remember my son saying, "Oh, we don't have any bullies in my school," with a lot of pride. So that
Mhm,
was a place there he really felt safe. I'm thinking about bullying. I'm thinking about the COVID years. I'm thinking
mhm.
about lockdown drills. I'm thinking about all of these things that not just the children are experiencing in the school environment, but the teachers, the principal, everybody's experiencing, and how much more of an obstacle it must be to try to create an environment of safety for
Mhm.
learning and social development for children.
I've been saying for years and years and years and years. I've worked with children for a long time. I've taught courses at the college level on teaching on children on in the area of special ed administration. Children act how they feel. Period. End of story. Guess what? Bullies usually don't feel good about themselves at all. So if you have a bullying situation, or you can see a student who might be having some behaviors, chances are, I would bet 100% of the time, that child is not feeling good about themselves. So there's two things, right? There's the proactive, which I really, really believe in, which is when we see a child starting with some behavioral things, we need to get to the bottom of why and what's going on, whether it's a case of just wanting to fit in, thinking that it's cool to do that, and why, where's that need to fit in, and why aren't you happy with yourself? And, these aren't things we ask little children, but these are things we talk about as a team. So there's the proactive part, which is identifying children who might not be feeling good about themselves and who might turn it around and become bullies in terms of making other children not feel good about themselves. And then empowering children is so important. We try in the school so every single day to help children have their voice. And when adults have conflicts, let's say I have two staff members that have conflicts, I could say, well, you need to go talk to that person. That is very, very hard. But that's what we're asking children to do. We're asking children to say, please stop, or, that's really bothering me. Can you stop? And that's really hard to do. We have the second step curriculum that really teaches that quite a bit, but we try to model that. I talk to children about this. I'll have a child come in and say, I feel like such and such is picking on me. And I'll say, you know what? That's not okay. And I'm going to take care of that because I want everyone in this school to feel safe. But I also want you to know that sometimes children who pick on other children don't feel good about themselves. So I'm also going to be working with that child to make sure that they feel better about themselves. Because one thing that bullies do is they make other people feel not great about themselves, so they feel better about themselves. And so I think it's important for children to understand. Obviously a kindergartner is not going to understand that, but once you hit second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade, we don't give kids enough credit as to the why and what we're going to do about it. And it's not just keeping you safe, but it's also figuring out why that child's acting that way. Because children who have self-confidence and feel good about themselves, they don't typically treat other children badly. It's usually the children who, and the whole idea of safety and that lockdown drills are important. And we have had the most tremendous support, not only from the Conway police, but the state police. Lockdown drills are so important. But children, not but, and many children feel afraid during lockdown drills or after lockdown drills. I have a 3-year-old right now who is not sleeping well after the last lockdown drill. And after talking to the parents, they understand we need to do these, da 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 da. The teacher handed everything perfectly. Where the child's older brother was talking about the fact about lockdown drills and why we have lockdown drills, because he needs to process it too, and trying to figure out how do we continue to make that 3-year-old feel so safe during those times. So I'm always thinking about safety, security, balanced with how children feel during those times. The police departments that we work with they try to get into the schools, they try to get to, be here for the kids, positive relationships. but still sometimes that lockdown is a little scary for children. And
Absolutely. It takes it from, when we were growing up, it was like maybe we'd have a fire drill. We
yeah,
all understood, yeah, sure, there
yeah,
could be a fire, but that
yeah.
just feels like really out there and impersonal, that there might be a fire in the school. It's such a different experience and thought process for a child to think about somebody aggressing against them or aggressing against the school. And I remember you were always amazing with my son, who had a lot of anxiety in general, but and certainly was not a big fan of lockdown drills. You always prepped us. You always actually gave him the opportunity to
Hmm.
decide, could he participate, to what
Hmm.
extent, what did he need to
Hmm.
get through it.
And we do that with students. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what, Donna, it's infuriating to me, just absolutely infuriating to me that we have to worry about our children in our schools and even being a principal. When I became a principal, I never imagined in my wildest dreams that we would have to do lockdown drills to keep children. It's infuriating. I can't even tell you the actual anger that I have around that for our children, our high school kids. What, that we have to do this.
Yes.
And that's a whole nother story that I probably shouldn't speak about, but
Well,
it's
it's
infuriating.
interesting because I'm thinking about, for anyone who has their own trauma history, even though you've worked on it for years. We adults, right? We come into our careers with our own levels of trauma, that we have vicarious trauma that can come about through our careers, even if, God willing, nothing horrible happens in the workplace. A lockdown drill can be very scary for a teacher. It can be really scary for a principal, so just acknowledging that, just to, I guess, kind of bring it back to your, personal life
Mhm.
experience when you made a decision like, I'm gonna go into a career where I'm of service to children, and I'm going to go into the education field and all of that, and just, kind of taking us through like what for you have been, I guess, the greatest lessons along the way in being part of the education system. And then also, what has it been like for you to balance your life in education, your life as an educator, your life as a principal, with trying to have a personal life? Like,
Yeah,
I've actually been curious because I know the kind of hours you put in. Like,
yeah.
I feel like, you live at the school. So I've always wondered, like, how do you do it? Like, how are you managing it all?
Yeah, so that's great. And I've been listening to your podcasts and thinking a lot about this. I am an extreme workaholic. So when I get going on something, I don't stop. And so I went into this year thinking, I have to work on better work-life balance, right? I'm not walking as much. I'm not, I need to start up yoga again. And I just get into these work modes where that's all I do is work, except when I'm visiting my kids or with family, and that always makes me happy. And I could work 24/7 and my goals still are achieved for what I want to do with the children and with the school. So, some of the people, I was listening to one of the podcasts where someone was talking about, I wish I remembered the name of the podcast. Someone was talking about grief and loss, and
Was
this
that
woman had this.
Jamie talking about the loss of her mother, Jamie?
Yes, 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 and how she's developed a balance. And I was driving home. I left school late, and I was sobbing on the way home because I was listening to her loss, and I was listening to, she seems to have a really good balance in life now. And I thought to myself, I need to get there. And just again, how profound these losses are. Right now I'm dealing with probable end of life stuff with my mother.
Oh, wow.
And so that podcast really hit me in so many ways, grief and loss and how she dealt with that. And then just getting a balance in life, which I have not mastered that yet, and I need to master. I have had a really bad shoulder for a while and often in excruciating pain. And today, before coming on this podcast, and because of this podcast, truly, Donna, I called my orthopedic doctor's office and I said, listen, I need to get in, I have to make an appointment. And that means I have to take a day off. Yes, I have to take a day off because that's when the appointments are. And yes, it's the middle of the day. I have a 1 hour commute each way, so it will be the whole day. And I have to do that for myself. I can't sleep. I'm in pain. I can't do pickleball. I'm in pain. There's some things I just can't do. And today, before coming on this podcast, that's truly how much impact the podcast has had on me. I called the doctor's office. It seems like such a small thing, but for me, it was huge. It was a huge thing for me today. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I mean, that's essential, right? It's essential that we do prioritize our self-care, and it brings up that issue of like, you have so much passion for what you do, and you're a giver and you serve. And yet you can't keep coming last because, when pickleball goes out the window and yoga goes out the window, we start to fall apart. So
I am. Yeah.
So I just wonder about that, like work-life balance, and balance, that word is elusive. There's no like final resting place that is balanced, but how have you managed to raise a family and you're at that school. I can't even guess. You must be sometimes 10 hours a day. Easy. So how'd you do it? How did you raise the kids? How did you, have a relationship? How have you maintained everything?
Yeah. So my boys are right now 32 and 34, and they're just wonderful. Adult children are wonderful. I enjoyed every minute of every day with them their entire lives, but adult children are really fun. And so one lives in California, well, too far, and he was married. He got married last year. So we do make it a point to get out to see him, and he'll come home. We might go out twice a year. He might come home 2 or 3 times a year. And those are huge. I will drop everything for that. Those are just huge, joyful times for me. My other son lives in Boston, and same thing. We're going out to see him next weekend. There'll be not a bit of work going on. So family, my niece is having twins in November, everything will stop for that. Wow. So like those moments that bring me so much joy, I can stop for those things. But my husband said this weekend, he said, let's do the pumpkin thing. Let's get mums. Let's do some fall things. And I'm sort of like, oh, to work on Monday. There's no way I can't work on Monday because, we have the day off on Monday, and, but that's okay. So it's perfect this weekend because I'll have 2 days off, 2 days of fun, 2 days of family, some time with him, and then I'll have a day to get my work done. It's hard during the day to get the work done because all I want to do is be out with the kids. All I want to be is in the classroom and out with the kids and being there for everybody. But I have to work on that as well. So it used to be when the boys were little, I typically would have a Sunday morning work time. So Sunday morning was a time when, they might sleep in a little bit, or sorry to say, they did love cartoons, so they might watch cartoons on a Sunday morning, and it was okay for me to pop out 3-4 hours of work. My husband is very, very hands-on, and pick one night a week to stay later. But I always, so yeah, I will stop for anything for family. And I have 4 really great girlfriends. We've been friends for a long, long time. One of them since we were in 2nd grade.
Oh my
God. And so we make plans twice a month to see each other doing things, and I will stop anything for that. So there are some things that I will stop for without a doubt.
Let's just preach about something that is at the core of my being, and I always talk about, is the essential ingredient in life, which is female friends. And
thank you.
Yes, that is like one of my main inspirations in life is, ladies, get yourself some good, healthy girlfriends and spend that time. It is time always worth spending.
Yeah. I remember one time, my husband said to me, I forgot what we were talking about. It must have been something, with a lot of feelings attached to it. But he said, when you go out with your girlfriends, you come back with such light. You have so much fun, and he doesn't understand that I can be goofy and silly, and we can be whatever. We don't have to be the mature adults that we always are. that that I am around him or whatever. It's different. Thank you. Thank you. I said, guys don't have, some of them, but don't have that type of relationship always. But you need women friends for sure. I agree 100%.
You need friends. You need friends. You need
Male,
friends.
female, whatever. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
need friends, but there's nothing like, you're right. And, the ability to be as silly and regressed as you want to be, to as serious and heartfelt and vulnerable as you need to be. There is a space within female friendship
Yeah.
for every stop along that spectrum. I mean,
Yeah.
and I do wonder, about your partnership with your husband, and, that, I guess, that give and take, of him having your back as you've been so invested in your career, as I'm sure you've had his back as well. But,
Yeah.
have there been times where he has felt, or you have felt, right, sort of like, well, what about me?
Yeah.
Where do we come in with all of this?
Yeah. So my husband's an attorney, director of a housing agency, and a mediator. So, you're never going to start a fight with him no matter what. Like, hey, I'm not biting. You had a bad day, but I'm not biting. It's like, let's just have a little fight. You're just never going to have that with him. And, I remember one Sunday at one point, I just sat down and I just started crying, and he wasn't quite sure what to, sit there patting my back. Is there anything I can do? What can I do? What do you need? And it's like, I don't just need to cry right now. Right. So Brad works a lot too, and I work a lot. And we've really been talking about that. Yeah, we'd like to travel more and do more things, and that balance. And yes, there are times absolutely where I feel like, well, what about me? And there are absolutely times when he's felt like, what about me? Of course I see those boys, my boys, and I just want to eat them up.
Yep.
I don't care how old they are. I want to snuggle them in the morning. I want to eat them up. And I think what my husband said one time, like, what about me? I'm like, I know, but they're still just the little boys to me. You know what I mean? It's a different. So we do have that. Absolutely. And, just so we don't get farther and farther apart, we try to keep that in check. We've talked about, we need to really work on, like, just sitting down talking about your feelings, like how you're feeling about something. He'll say something like someone didn't put the bath mat in too early and it's all wet. Well, dear, there's only 2 of us living in the house, so when you say someone, why don't you just say me? I go, you know what I would do? I wouldn't say anything. I just wouldn't say anything. If, it's like someone.
Maybe it's the ghost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we often in my line of work with couples, we'll talk about, for folks who are married, we'll call it the marriage meeting. For folks who are not married, we'll call it the relationship meeting. But it's an opportunity, and it's structured once a week at a predictable time, or as predictable as you can make it. You sit down with a template, which starts with moments of gratitude and includes things that you have to make time-sensitive decisions around, and it includes things like division of labor, but it also includes like the planning of fun and connecting around a concern or an issue between the two of you. And so if you haven't seen a template for that, I'd be happy to share one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's really useful. It's kind of like the State of the Union address with your
Yeah.
partner, and you try to do it once a week. And it's, it takes about a half an hour. And no, it's not for like extensively deep processing, but
Yeah.
it is a way to, like, say, do I have any little pebbles in my pocket that might turn into boulders? And
Yes.
how do we make sure we connect with each other and kind of hit all of the marks of what it is to run a life together and run a relationship together, and
Yeah.
hold ourselves accountable to showing up to one another in this way. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's some value in that, especially for people who are working so much, right?
I
Well,
think
this
every new couple should be in marriage counseling. Every new couple. I mean, you develop, every couple in general, but every new couple, because you can develop right away those habits in those conversations to, so when things get hard, you have that. Wouldn't that be great if every new couple just, once a week, and
What's really interesting, and marriage or not, it's been really neat to see younger and younger couples showing up for
Love it.
treatment early in their relationship, sort of with this
Mhm,
awareness of like, this is a thing people do. It's not a bad thing to do. It's a good proactive thing to do.
mhm,
Like, let's not wait till there's issues and we're entrenched in gridlock patterns, but like
mhm.
just this awareness of like, this is something we can do as maintenance. This is a good thing to do. That I'm so glad. I think the tide is turning somewhat in terms of the stigma around getting support as a couple,
Yeah,
right? It's just, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So we had said at the beginning of the podcast, we are ladies that need to pee a lot, and probably our listeners do too. So I'm going to suggest this is a great time to take a pee
Sorry, you've
break.
been chat.
Yeah, no, this is wonderful. And we'll have a little time to hear from our sponsor. Be right back. If you're enjoying Over It, make sure you follow us on Spotify, Amazon Music, or Apple Music. Welcome back, Over It. We're still here with Kristen Gordon. And Kristen, I am wondering about just your experience as a woman in your 50s. What's it like for you to be in your 50s? What's going on in terms of like your relationship to your body, your hormones, your emotions, anything you care to share about this journey?
Sure. Well, the funny thing, I was out to dinner with my friends last week, and we were picking dates for, each month, and they said, "Oh, how about, such and such for your birthday dinner?" I'm like, "That, yeah, that works." I go, "I love that I'm going to be 48 again, because all this past year I thought I was 48." And they looked at me and they said, "You mean 58?" I was like, "Oh my God." So I feel like I'm 48 actually. So
That's
there's that.
wonderful.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful.
So being an adult with PTSD, and Donna, 10 years ago I would have never said that. 20 years, I would have never said that. But being an adult with PTSD, um, you are always waiting for the other shoe to drop. You go to the worst case scenario. Okay, this happened. What's the worst case scenario? You don't look at all the gray, you're black and white. And being an adult with PTSD, that's where I'd always go to. And in my 50s, I am not doing that anymore, which is, that is so freeing in itself, because I don't want to say I don't care, but I don't care. I know I come to work every day for the children and supporting staff. So if someone's upset with the decision, which typically, I'm not saying that, but I would get kind of anxious about it. And I know I'm making the decisions that are best for kids. If I have, someone that giving advice to, they ask for advice and maybe they don't like my advice, I typically go home with an, feeling anxious. I'm not, that's all gone. I am a kind, humble person. And so I know what I say and do is always coming from a good place. That is huge. That piece of PTSD. I have a friend that has some significant PTSD too. And once in a while, she'll call me or I'll call her. She's an administrator too. And she'll say, "Oh boy, I just had to do this. My PTSD is setting in." I'll be like, "Okay, breathe. We got this. Now, what are your worries?" And she'll do the same to me. And then boom, it's gone. So that's amazing. Really amazing. I was always self-conscious about the way I looked from I was, 10 on. And in my 50s, I feel like it's no more about who you are, and what's life about, and not comparing yourself as much. And not, I used to put pictures up, right, of what I wanted to look like, what I want my body to look like, what I ridiculousness, but that's what I did. And so I'm not doing that. For me, it's about being healthy more than the body type or whatever. But it was that way for a long time. I grew up on my mother watching soap operas, and I don't blame her, because, but that did a number to my psyche.
Yeah.
That's just quite a number in terms of the role of men, the role of women, how women should look, all of that. If anyone's watching soap operas out there, please don't let your teenage daughters or preteens look at that. So, body, emotions, able to, just express myself better, which is freeing. And I don't look at it as, I just look at it as good times, because you just feel better about everything you do. You're not, I don't know, as a female, I went to a all female college, and I know that we don't do that anymore, and I understand all the reasons why, but it was really, really good for me in learning leadership skills, because for whatever reason, the way I grew up, what I watched, the way I saw things, women weren't leaders. It was the man that was the leader. It was the man that was the breadwinner. And so going to that school just let me become a leader. And so that was very helpful. But I had all those images to break. And now that I'm in my 50s, they're gone. I want to see the Barbie movie, but Barbie was one of the things that destroyed me as a kid.
I haven't seen it yet either. And everybody has said it's amazing. You have to see it. It's really like a sort of a feminist sort of kind of expression.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, for me, Barbie was like, I should go and see it. But like, for me, Barbie was like, it was just another standard I couldn't reach.
Yeah,
So
I'm pissed off at Barbie, to be honest with you.
yeah, yes,
And
yeah.
and then, your body's, we're starting to get aches and pains and things like that, but then take care of them, right? Don't just take care of them. We're at an age where we have to take care of those. And that's why, like I said, the phone call to the doctor was, no, you have to take care of this. If you don't take care of it now, you're gonna be really sorry in 10 years that you didn't take care of it. So I'm having fun in my 50s. I think my 30s were the hardest, but I think the 50s are fun. We're looking at life in a different way, right? And being a caregiver your whole life. And for me, now my children are grown, and they now call and check up on us. They, call and see what you have for dinner and things like that. That's kind of fun.
Real role change. But you also mentioned, obviously, your mom coming to end
Yes.
life. And I mean, I just think this is also part of experience, right? For many of us in our 50s, of like, wherever we are, if we have children,
Yeah.
we may still be raising our children, or we may have just launched our children. And now, if we have parents alive or primary caregivers that we're in relationship with, they're falling to pieces. And so it's
Yeah.
like, oh no, I have to shift my energy over here, or I have to, I'm still focused over here, and I have to be focused over here in
Yeah.
care of parents. And like, that's on your plate now too.
Yeah. My mother got very ill, very, very ill, during the COVID time, and she had to go on dialysis, and there's no road from dialysis. There's no, and boy, did I have a hard time. Of course, I'm a person with complicated grief. I had very hard time. Like, I'm not ready to lose my mother, and da da da. And actually, Dr. Jessica Dakis, who I do love, um, she's a friend. I called her one day and I said, Jess, when you have a few minutes, I said, I'm just having a really hard time thinking about letting go of my mother. And she was so wonderful. She said that I needed to have peaceful times with my mother. We needed to listen to music that she liked. And she was just, I'll forever be grateful to her. My mother's still alive, but she's not in great shape. And I'm just in a better place. And there was another person who sort of helped put it together for me. And just talking to Jess, she's very calm. She's very comforting. And, 2 days later, I was in a different place, like, hey, Mom, you want to listen to some Carly Simon when she was in the hospital and things like that. And it really, she said, when your mom passes, you don't want to be in a very difficult state, because that will be hard for her. If you're in a peaceful state, she will be in a peaceful state. And it really changed me in terms of how I'm dealing with my mother, just not getting any better. And, no one's ever prepared for that day, but I feel like I'm in a different position.
Yes, it's a beautiful sentiment, and something that, I try to be aware of in terms of my parenting as well, that when we can get our own nervous systems to a regulated space, to a space of peace,
Mhm.
that is the biggest gift we can give to anybody else
Mhm.
who's around us. And so somebody who's going through the process of passing, however long that process takes,
Mhm.
and you're a bit of a midwife in that process for your
Mhm.
mother. And so the
Mhm.
more you can give to yourself during this time and show up in a regulated space, with some peace as well as some
Mhm.
grief, I think the more she'll benefit. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now when she calls me and says, so the dress in the back closet, that's the one I want you to dress me in for the wake. I'm like, Mom, I'm not having, but now it could be like, okay, Mom, thanks for letting me know, if there's anything else you want to let me know. It's, I used to say, Mom, stop, this is ridiculous, but I let her tell me what she wants,
We can be in this
and,
reality together.
mhm,
We can
mhm,
be in this
mhm,
reality together, right? I
mhm,
can handle it. You can handle it. We can be in this reality together. Not our
mhm,
preferred reality, but we can be in this reality together.
mhm, mhm. And yeah, and also I just want to mention that being a female in a leadership position, brings me great joy. That it is turning in terms of women in leadership positions. But it's not always an easy role. So when I was superintendent for about 6 years, and I wanted to get back with the kids, but I would go to superintendent meetings and I'd look around me and it'd be wonderful, wonderful, inspiring men. It's just wonderfully inspiring. So it's fun. I really enjoy being in the leadership position.
Yes. So are you finding that there are more and more female colleagues you have who are also in leadership positions as
I
time goes
am,
on?
yeah. So our superintendent's a male, but he's the most wonderful person that you'd ever meet. He's unbelievably supportive of the students and staff and parents and community. Um,
And he has a great voice.
and
He has a
yeah,
great,
he's
he does the
just,
recordings, right? When school is
yeah,
going to be
he's
flipped.
just
Oh, he's got the
absolutely,
most wonderful, soothing
absolutely
voice.
amazing. Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't want anyone else to be leading the district I'm a principal in. But yes, I'm seeing that. I'd love to, that's one of my goals, to sort of look into that and and how that's working for women in terms of life work balance and all of that. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So as we're coming sort of to the end of our episode together, I'm wondering, one question I like to ask sometimes is if you could go back in time and say something to your 16-year-old self, give her
Mm,
some perspective,
mhm.
what would you share?
So I learned that from a counselor once to, if you're feeling vulnerable, go back and talk to your 5-year-old self. When you have that pit in your stomach, like you did going to school when you were 6 years old, the same pit, it's a very familiar feeling. Go back and talk to your 6-year-old child. That's really, really hard because that was a really painful time. But I do try to do that. And so what I'd say to my 16-year-old self is that, you're gonna make it, that, um, you don't have to worry about being invited by the popular group or not invited by the popular group. You don't have to worry if you don't have a prom date, you don't have a prom date. Things will work out. Um, find your own happiness. At 16 years old, I was completely insecure. I was definitely, I didn't feel like it was a privilege to be my friend. I
Mm,
always say to kids, you know what? If that person isn't playing with you today, it is a privilege to be your friend. You are
oh,
so, it's a privilege to be your friend. I didn't feel like that at 16 years old. And I would make myself, if I could go back, I would make myself feel that way. But I didn't feel, I try to talk to kids like about that a lot. Like it's a privilege to be your friend.
love that.
Yeah.
What would you say, because I know your 30s were particularly rough, what would you say to your 32-year-old self?
Um, I'd say to my 32-year-old self, that I needed to tell my story more, that I needed to lean on people more. Um, I remember the day of my sister's wake this is when I was older, obviously 40. Um, I needed to drive to her wake alone I needed to drive to her funeral alone. I have so many wonderful people. I have a big, huge family. But I needed to do that alone. And I would tell my 32-year-old self, you don't need to do anything alone. You know, you can lean on people, and you need to lean on people, and you need to let bits of your story out more, because I didn't do that, and I should have done it.
I think that's beautiful. I know that when we don't tell our stories, if there's shame hiding in our nooks and crannies, not telling our stories, it just amplifies the shame. It makes the
Mhm,
shame grow like mold the
mhm,
more we hold our stories in. So I think that that's beautiful advice. And that's where you started this podcast as well, as telling that little girl in your life right now. Tell your story and keep
mhm,
telling it, because every time you tell it, a little part of you will
mhm,
heal.
mhm, mhm.
I just really want to tell you it's a privilege to be your friend.
Oh, I love you, Donna, so much.
I love
You're
you too.
just joy.
Oh, I feel the same way about you.
You're the
You
real deal.
you're the real deal too, Kristen, and maybe we need to go see the Barbie movie together and
Let's do it.
go have some margaritas or
Let's
something.
do it.
I mean,
Deal.
I hate to take you even further away from family and other friends, but
Oh
I
no,
might
you need to take me further away from work
I've
and all of
I've
that,
been
please.
literally I've been dreaming of a date with Kristen Gordon for many years. And the one thing that stops me is always think, well, that woman has so much on her plate. How can you possibly ask her to do something with
Please
you?
do. Please make me.
Oh,
I
well,
would love it. I would
I
love it.
I would love that too. And I mean, I hope you get as much love as you give out back to you every single day,
Thank
because
you.
you're making an extraordinary difference. And I know that you're an adult who identifies as having PTSD. And I often think PTSD could easily stand for perfectly, tremendously, stupendously divine, because you are divine.
Oh, I love that.
Yes. And I just want to thank you so much for being part of Over It today. And I know that all of our listeners will take a little something special away from today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was an honor, privilege, and a lot of fun. And after telling my story, I feel even a little bit better. So
Let's just
thank you.
telling our stories. Just
Yeah.
keep on going. All right. Love you.
Love you too. Bye.